History Chapter 1, Class 10th, Part 2. The Rise of Nationalism in Europe. In this video, we are going to discuss Part 2, The Making of Nationalism in Europe. Before discussing the topic, let's see the map of Europe. Try to find out how many countries are here in this modern political map of Europe. After that, we shall see the map of Europe in the 18th century. This is the map of Europe in the 18th century. Just find out what is the difference between the map you have seen earlier and this map. Before going further, also see some important dates which changed the history of Europe. First, 1797, Napoleon invades Italy. Napoleonic Wars begin. Then 1814 to 1815, fall of Napoleon, and then the Congress of Vienna and the Vienna Peace Settlement. 1821, Greek struggle for independence begins. 1848, revolutions in Europe. Artisans, industrial workers, and peasants revolt against economic hardships. Middle class also demanded some changes in constitutions. Then Italians, Germans, Magyars in modern Hungary, Poles, Czechs, etc. demanded nation states. Then next, unification of Italy and unification of Germany. In 1905, Slav nationalism gathers force in the Habsburg and Ottoman empires. If you will see the map of mid-18th century Europe, you will find that there were no nation states as we know them today. What we find that today's Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons. These were under rulers as autonomous territories. Similarly, Eastern and Central Europe were under autocratic monarchies. Under one king or under one monarchy, people of different regions were having different language, different culture, and generally they even speak different languages and belong to different ethnic groups. For example, the Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria Hungary was a combination of many different regions and people. It included so many parts like Austria, the Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia, and these areas were predominantly German speaking. Lombardy and Venetia were Italian speaking provinces. Then Hungary's 50% population spoke Magyar, etc. So we can say that there was not any nation state that time. But how did nationalism and the idea of nation state emerge in Europe? the aristocracy and the new middle class. As we know, socially and politically, aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent, that means Europe, and they were very powerful. They spoke French for purposes of diplomacy and in high society. Their families were often connected by ties of marriage. They were, as a result, very powerful, but numerically they were a small group. The Industrial Revolution led to the rise of another class which was called middle class. In Western and parts of Central Europe, the growing of industrial production and trade led to the growth of towns and the rise of very powerful, rich commercial classes, and it was given the name the middle class. This middle class was made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals. They were educated, they were having the ideas such as national unity and abolition of aristocratic privileges, etc. This led to further another idea which is known as liberal nationalism. So, what did liberal nationalism stand for? The term liberalism derives from the Latin word liber, which means free. For the new middle classes, liberalism stood for freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. Politically, it gave stress on the concept of government by consent. In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capitals. Actually, there were so many restrictions in Europe on the supply of goods and capital. We take one example of the German speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. Germany was a confederation of 39 states that time. Each of these possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in 1833 from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods had to pass through 11 customs barriers and pay a custom duty of about 5% at each one of them. Even the system of weights and measures was different from region to region. For example, the measure of cloth, which was called LA, in each region stood for a different length. An alley of textile material bought in Frankfurt was equal to 54.7 centimeter of cloth, whereas in Mainz it was 55% 1 centimeter. In Nuremberg it was 65.6 centimeter. In Freiburg it was 53.5 centimeter. The new middle class or the new commercial classes demanded creation of a unified economic territory, allowing the unrestricted movement of goods, people, and capital. In 1834, a customs union or Zollverein, sometimes it is also called Zollverein or Zollverein, was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. This union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the numbers of currencies from over 30 to only two. A new conservatism after 1815. After the defeat of Napoleon in 1815 in the Battle of Waterloo, European governments were driven by a spirit of conservatism. What is conservatism? It means a political philosophy that stressed the importance of tradition, established institutions and customs, and preferred gradual development to quick change. In 1815, representatives of the European powers such as Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria met at Vienna to draw up a settlement for Europe. This congress was hosted by the Austrian Chancellor Duke Metternich. They drew up the Treaty of Vienna of 1815. It is also famous as the Congress of Vienna of 1815. The objective of this treaty was to undo most of the changes that had come in Europe during the Napoleon era. For example, the Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored to power, and France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. A series of states were set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future, for example, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The new regimes which were set up in Europe, they were autocratic. Most of them imposed censorship laws to control such as newspapers, books, plays, and songs, which were reflecting the ideas of liberty and freedom after the French Revolution. The revolutionaries. After 1815, the fear of repression drove many liberal nationalists underground. Many secret societies were set up in different European states to train revolutionaries and spread their ideas. Most of these revolutionaries also saw the creation of nation states as a necessary part of this struggle for freedom. One such individual was the Italian revolutionary Mazzini. He was born in Genoa in 1807. He became a member of the secret society. He was later exiled. Then he founded two more underground societies, first Young Italy and then Young Europe. He believed that God had intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. Following his model, secret societies were also set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. I repeat again, following his model, secret societies were set up in Germany, France, Switzerland, and Poland. Mazzini's relentless opposition to monarchy and his vision of democratic republics frightened the conservatives. Metternich described him as the most dangerous enemy of our social order. That's all in this video. We shall continue part 3 in the next video.